Thank you very much. I'm going to have to do this in English, so let me know if anything isn't quite clear. And for those of you who I haven't met before, I recognize a few of you from some of the classes at CETM. If I tell people that I'm from the South in America, so I may speak with a Southern accent occasionally, and if you need me to explain something I'm saying, just let me know. So what I wanted to talk with you tonight about is an idea that we've been exploring for a while in my organization. We call Relentless Innovation. And the idea that we started with was the concept that innovation is something that every company needs, but tries occasionally and struggles with, or perhaps succeeds, but then takes a long time to repeat. And one of the things that we were confronted with one of our clients was that we presented some really interesting ideas to a very large firm. And one of the senior executives in that firm said to us, I really like these ideas. These could become excellent products and services. But the BAU won't let us do that. And I said, I'm not familiar with the term or the phrase BAU. B period, A period, U period. And the gentleman said to me, well, that's business as usual. And the biggest challenge we have in our business, he said to us, was trying to do innovation in a culture that's used to doing things as business as usual. And to define that a little further, business as usual just becomes the way you typically do things in your business. And what we looked at it when we delved deeper into this idea is we discovered that many firms have a business as usual, how you get things done in your business. And the better you are at the way you get things done in your business, in many times it becomes a bigger and bigger barrier to do innovation. So we began to discover a little bit more about firms that do innovation well and what distinguishes them or differentiates them from firms that don't do innovation well. And that's the idea behind this concept of relentless innovation. What does it take to become a firm that can innovate all the time? How do you structure your firm in order to do that? And what are the characteristics of that firm? So we're going to talk a little bit tonight on that topic. And I'm going to throw in some humor along the way. And at the end, if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any that you have. So in the States, I'm going to explain some of these. I don't know if all these references will make sense, but in the States we have a game show. You may have one like this, where they give you the answer, and then you have to propose the question. So the question is, how do we become better at innovating all the time? How do you become what we'll call a relentless innovator? And the real question is then, if relentless innovation is the answer I want to achieve, if I want to innovate all the time, then the real question is, how do I do that when there's so much conflict, when there's so much uncertainty, when things are changing so frequently, when the demands on the day-to-day business are so difficult? How do I begin to become a more innovative company and remain very innovative in the face of all these challenges? And that's the goal. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So what I'd like to do is give you just a little overview of what we'll talk about as we go through that process. So there are a couple of things I want to do. One is to introduce myself a little bit more deeply, give you a little bit more sense of who we are and what we do. And then I'd like to talk about 5 things that I think are impacting every business, that are going to drive the need for more and more innovation. And then we're going to talk about how we got to where we are today. And that's an interesting way of looking at the recent history to discover how difficult it is to innovate. And then we're going to change and ask ourselves, now that we understand these barriers, and you'll see business as usual is called out there, now that we understand that business as usual is an issue, how do we overcome it? So those are the things I'd like to accomplish with you tonight. First thing I'm going to do very quickly is talk to you a little bit about who we are and what we do. And Eduardo's already started that. I'll just go a little bit deeper. I work with a firm called OVO. OVO is a firm that works with other large and mid-sized organizations around the world. I've been fortunate enough this year to be in Istanbul, Turkey, to be in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, to be in Dubai, to be in South Africa, and in London as well. And I just came back from Shanghai. And the interesting thing is, everywhere we go, people have the same question. How do we do innovation more consistently? How do we do it more effectively and more productively? So our organization is out trying to help other companies and other countries, for that matter, become better at innovation. As Eduardo told you, I have 2 books. If you really like the presentation tonight, please rush out and acquire them as quickly as possible. There will be weak attempts at humor throughout the presentation. It would be appreciated if you chuckle along at the appropriate times. And if you're not sure, I'll tell you when to laugh. On the left, I write a ongoing blog. If any of you are interested in social media or blogs, I write about a 3 times a week blog called Innovate on Purpose. It's been ranked as the top 1 or 2 blogs in the world on innovation the last 2 years in a row. So pretty pleased with that. And on the right there are some of our material and white papers. If you're interested, you can go to our website. We publish quite frequently what we think about innovation. On the blog, it's really more a commentary about innovation. And we also participate on social media. I'm on Twitter, so @OVO Innovation is the Twitter handle as well. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to get involved with us or to align to some of the things we're publishing. That's how you can find our material. This is a list of some of the companies that we work with. As I said, we've worked in many countries in Western Europe and Southeast Asia. I've been really fortunate to get to work with the gentlemen and ladies at Sadim and have enjoyed my time there very much. Innovation is a worldwide phenomenon. We're very lucky to get to work on that activity in a lot of places. And the idea behind this slide is to say that we've done innovation work in a lot of different kinds of organizations and a lot of different kinds of industries. And through all that, what's interesting is to discover how similar the issues are, regardless of what kind of organization you are, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of the size of your industry. Much of what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is applicable regardless of any of those issues, regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of the maturity of your business, regardless of the size of your business. What we found is that some of these core innovation principles and barriers are common regardless of all that different kind of setting. What we talk about a lot with the clients that we work with is the idea that innovation does not have to be accidental. Innovation should be purposeful. So you'll see that we have a tagline there in the middle called Innovate on Purpose. And the idea behind that is that anything you do well in a business, you do repeatedly. You train people how to do it. You create processes to support it. People understand how to do it well. And yet, when we say innovation is important, we don't do any of those things. We don't train people, we don't define processes, we don't align to the best tools and techniques. So our methodology and what we talk about with our clients is based on this, if you will, it's a funnel. And the idea is that there is a process that you can follow to become a better innovator. And what we're trying to do is help people do as good a job defining ideas. Where do ideas come from? How do I manage them? And how do I convert them to new products and services much better and much more effectively than they do today? And you'll see here we've identified innovation as a funnel. More ideas coming in on the left, fewer products and services going out on the right. And that funnel is governed by 2 fairly important aspects. On the top, corporate strategy. What is your corporate strategy about innovation? How fast do you want to grow? How much do you want to differentiate? How do you keep from being disrupted in your business, or who are you trying to disrupt? How much clarity is there around that, and do people understand their roles in innovation once we've defined the corporate strategy? The other barrier or enabler you'll see is at the bottom, and that's corporate culture. And corporate culture is just a word we use, or a phrasey word we use to talk about things like attitudes, behaviors, and characteristics of the organization. What do we think about ourselves? Do we think we're creative or not creative? Do we reward people who innovate or who fail to innovate? So if you do nothing else, if you remember nothing else coming out of this meeting tonight, remember that there are 2 really simple things that either help innovation or hurt innovation, and they have nothing to do with tools and techniques. They have to do with how you think about your organization, how your organization thinks about itself. And then the boxes inside that funnel basically just define a process. And these are tools and techniques that we link together in a way to help organizations innovate more consistently and more effectively. So that sort of ends what I wanted to talk to you about what we think about innovation and the kinds of services that we offer. What I want to do is shift gears for a minute and talk about 5 things that are going to drive the need for more innovation. Today, most organizations look at innovation as something they should do occasionally. Our argument is that increasingly innovation is going to be something you need to do all the time. In fact, we believe it's going to be as important as many of the business processes that you may consider a core competency in your business. And there are things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in your environment that are going to drive that, and they're going to drive the need for more innovation. Let's talk about the 5 things that we think are going to drive the need for more innovation. The first one is trade barriers. You'll notice I have a picture of President Clinton there when the NAFTA bill was signed, which freed up trade throughout North America. But that's hardly the only free trade agreement underway. Trade barriers are falling everywhere. In the U.S., we've just signed 3 new trade agreements with countries like South Korea and with Colombia. What that means, though, is that more and more products from more and more countries and companies come rushing into your markets. And that's no different than here or anywhere else on the planet. Everywhere you look, trade barriers are falling. And when trade barriers fall, your market becomes much more interesting and much more enticing to people who want to come in and do business with you. That means that your products and your services that perhaps that haven't faced as much competition in the past are going to face a lot more competition. And when that happens, product life cycles shrink, customers become more interested in alternative products and services, and your need to change your products and update your products becomes much more compelling. So one of the first issues we like to talk about is how fast are the trade barriers falling, how much change is happening in your market, how many new competitors are able to enter your market because of the falling trade barrier. Second topic, the pace of change is increasing minute by minute. I used to tell the story that if I went back to the ancient Romans and I plucked a soldier out from the ancient Romans and took him 600 years into the future, everything about his equipment, everything about his armament, everything about the way he fought would look very familiar. But if I went back to the American Civil War, which happened about 100 years ago, and compared the weapons and the armament and the tactics to what's happening in the battlefields today, they would look nothing alike. This chart indicates that using technology. What this chart shows is how fast or how long it took for different technologies to reach a certain critical adoption rate. And you'll see that on the far left there, it took items like a car or a telephone decades before they reached 60 or 70% of households. And as you move further and further to the left, you'll see that technologies increasingly were adopted much faster than they ever were before. What that means then is that every product that you produce is likely to be adopted much more quickly than the one previously. Faster adoption cycles mean that people also become more immune to changes. They want newer products faster than they ever did before. We're more adept at adopting new products, which means we get tired of products faster and new products come on the market faster than ever. The pace of change, how fast things are changing, is vitally important to how frequently you need to innovate and how often you need to innovate. These two, so this is the third issue, expectations, and these two go hand in hand. We, our customers, we ourselves are driving a lot of change in the market based on our expectations. Anytime a new product or service comes along, everyone wants to adopt it, but increasingly they become dissatisfied with it much more quickly. Every new product that comes out, all of us as customers look at it and weigh its expectations and its benefits. And we have a very high expectation of new benefits, new features, new services, or we reject that product or service. We as consumers are driving change in the marketplace through our demands. And we have more options than we ever had before because of the falling trade barriers, but we are also much more capable of adopting new technologies and using them more effectively than ever before. So all of us in the room are driving that pace of change from an adoption point of view. Fourth item, access to information. I used to like to say that America, U.S., that we have a lockhold on the best universities. We like to think we have some of the best universities. But I can tell you today that some of the best universities in the world aren't in the U.S. They're in places like India and they're in places like China. And what that means is that people aren't necessarily coming to the States or to Western Europe or to Mexico to get educated. They're staying home and they're building businesses wherever they are. And the more and more access to information that's available, the more and more education that's happening, and it's happening all over the world, means that new competitors are springing up in places that we never considered to be competitors before. All around the world right now, there's more and more access to education and information than ever existed, which means more and more competitors are being created all the time. So as you begin to think about more information and more access, realize that your competitors are springing up in places you don't think about. So yesterday, I'm from the state of North Carolina in the States, and I had lunch with our governor. There was about 15 of us that were called in to talk to the governor. And she wanted our opinions on what was happening in new product and innovation in the world. And she got up and spoke a little bit about how our state competes with other states. And one of the things that I wanted to remind her of is our state doesn't compete with Texas or New York. Our state also competes with Finland and Singapore and India. And until we start thinking about where all our competitors are and how fast they're gaining access to information and how inexpensive that information and education is, we're thinking too narrowly about the kind of innovation we need. So this fourth issue is how much information, how much education is available. The last one. Not only are trade barriers falling, but it's so easy to get into any market now. I told my wife the other day that 5 or 10 years ago, if you told me that I might buy products or services regularly from someone in the Ukraine, they would have laughed at me. But now for someone in the Ukraine to sell me something, they basically need a website. The internet has made it such that I can buy and sell products and services from just about anywhere, anytime, at just about zero cost. So the fact is that the cost of entry into any market, into almost any industry, is rapidly approaching zero. Another good story here, my daughters last year went on a mission trip to Africa. They spent time in Uganda, in the wilds of Uganda, very, very wild place in Uganda. They came home and they had 2 new friends. Now those 2 new friends from Uganda live in a grass hut. Literally, they live in a grass hut. But both of those people have Facebook accounts. They don't have running water. They don't have electricity in their homes, but they have Facebook accounts. So if you think about the access to the internet in a place like that and what it could mean to even people in those situations, how fast these things can begin to change, you can begin to see the pace of change is accelerating, access to information and education is accelerating, the ability to enter your market is accelerating. And all those things mean there's more and more need for innovation. So I've given you 5 things to think about in terms of how much increasing need there is for innovation and some drivers for more innovation. So where are we in most organizations today? What would we look like today? Well, I searched the web and I found a picture that I think represents where we are in our ability to react to all 5 of these things. Are you ready for that picture? That's not enough enthusiasm. Are you ready for that picture? Yes, okay, good. So what this picture represents is our readiness to take advantage of these 5 changes. And that picture looks like that. So this is a representation of our companies, of most of our companies' readiness to react to all 5 things I've just talked about. We're in an old car, we're stuck in the mud, we're pointed in the wrong direction, and we're out of gas. Right? All these factors I've told you about should not be news to you. What should be news to you is that they all combine to create much greater need for innovation at a time when your organizations are actively resisting those changes. Now what I want to do is shift gears and tell you why I think they're resisting those changes and why innovation seems so difficult. And to do that, I'm going to lace throughout my presentation. I'm a big cultural icon sort of fan, and one of my favorite bands is Talking Heads. And one of their songs has a line in it that says, "Well, how did we get here?" And that's a really important question. When you find yourself stuck in the mud, when you find yourself pointing the direction in the wrong direction in the face of a lot of challenges, we should stop and ask ourselves, what is it that is influencing our thinking? How did we get here? So to continue on the sort of pop culture references, I used some mile markers. There was a TV show many, many years ago in the States about a crazy family that was formed when a mom with 3 daughters and a man with 3 sons got together, and they called it the Brady Bunch. And this is really an icon that will go back to the 1970s. And I'd like to take you back 30 or 40 years and talk about when everything was wonderful. So let's go back in the Wayback Machine and talk about when there was harmony in our businesses around innovation. So there was a time about 30 or 40 years ago, I'll make the argument, that there was a balance between what I'll call efficiency on one side and innovation on the other. They were relatively in balance. There was a lot of work to make our businesses more efficient, but there was also a lot of creativity and innovation in those businesses as well. And what's happened over the time is there's been a big shift, and I want to describe why that shift occurred. The first thing that happened, about middle of 1980s, was we had this movement called the quality movement. And what happened is that many businesses in North America, both in the US, Mexico, and other places, recognized that the Japanese were making products that were better than our products. And everyone decided that we needed better quality. So what happened is we created quality circles, we created quality programs, we created quality functions, we created quality assessments. Anybody in here ever do any quality work? You can raise your hand. Yeah, we all, most likely, are a lot of people here who did quality. And actually that was a really important thing. We were creating products that weren't all that great, and we needed to focus more on quality. But we got a little carried away with it, and quality led on to Six Sigma and Lean. So what happened is then we realized that, well, our organizations, they're a little bit top-heavy. They're a little bit fat. They need a little trimming. They need a little bit of efficiency. We need to do more with less. And so the ideas behind Lean and Six Sigma came along to identify waste and issues in your processes and places where perhaps we could be much more efficient and much more effective. And these processes happened in the late 80s and early 90s, where we really focused on getting better at becoming much more efficient. But we didn't stop there. We had the quality movement, we had the Lean and Six Sigma movement. But we went on. Then everyone realized, well, you know what? I can actually get better labor costs in other places. I can outsource functions. I can find other places to move my businesses or particular pieces of my practice. So we went further, and we constantly, all 3 of these activities, if you go back and think about them, all 3 of these activities are about becoming more efficient. We're focusing on reducing costs, taking fat out of the process, and becoming more efficient. That's what the quality movement was ultimately about. That's what Lean and Six Sigma were ultimately about. And that's what outsourcing, right-sizing, downsizing, whatever you want to call it, was all about becoming more efficient. So for the last 30 to 40 years, all the major thinking in most of the major businesses around the world has been about becoming more efficient. That's not to say that was wrong. It's just to say that I believe the pendulum has swung much too far to efficiency and too far away from innovation. So where did that leave us? It left us with a generation of managers to whom the sole focus of being a manager was about being efficient. All they worried about, all they focused on, was how do I squeeze cost out of the equation. So increasingly this becomes like a seesaw. We've placed far too much emphasis on efficiency and far too little emphasis on innovation. So I'm going to show you a picture now of the kind of animal that I think about when I think about our organizations. Are you familiar with a fiddler crab? A fiddler crab is really famous in nature. If you look at most nature, if you think about most things in nature, you can bisect them, you can split them in half, and the left and the right look basically the same. The fiddler crab is one of the few animals in nature that is not that way. The fiddler crab has one really large claw and one really small claw. And I would argue that most of our managers and most of our businesses are a lot like fiddler crabs. They have exercised the claw that I'll call efficiency very well and very often. They know how to use it, they know when to use it, and they know where to use it. they have another claw or another capability that I'll call innovation. And you can see it's a really small claw because they don't use it very often, they aren't sure how to use it, and it's not all that effective or capable. We've created a generation, if not 2 generations of managers who understand efficiency but don't understand innovation. So as I said, I'm going to continue to use sort of cultural icons, and I want to come forward to another dysfunctional family to kind of bring you back into this period. So if everything I told you about the challenges of efficiency are true, now that we're in our markets that we're in today, what does that all mean to us? What has that created? What kind of thinking has that created in our business? So I want to make the argument that this is actually fairly simple, that there are really 2 issues. There's 2 issues that block innovation in a mid-size or large business. So if you're writing stuff down, you can write this down and then you can go to sleep for the rest of the presentation. 2 issues. And they are business as usual and middle management. So I'm going to describe both of those for you. Every one of you works in a business that has defined how it works. More than likely you have some sort of process map in your business somewhere that says, when we get an order, this is what we do. When we make something, this is what we do. When we process a purchase order, this is what we do. Right? That's fairly common. And over years, what you've done is you define that process and you've made it better and you've made it more efficient and you've taken the cost out of it. And that's great. But what happens is that becomes the mantra of your organization. That becomes all you think about. And it becomes what we call business as usual. And the problem with business as usual is as it becomes more effective and more efficient, it rejects innovation. Because if you think about innovation, innovation is risky, it's uncertain, it's unproven, it's difficult, and it's very, very different than what you do on a regular basis. And the more efficient something is, the more it's going to reject things that are unlike what it does. So as your business as usual gets defined and improved, it becomes really efficient. It's like an engine. And that engine wants to work in a particular way. It wants to work in a way that keeps it being efficient, not keeps it being innovative. What's more, if any of you have flown on an airline, you know that the guys in the front, they're not up there with their hands on the steering wheel all the time. They flip into autopilot and let the plane fly itself. If you have a very effective, efficient business model, for the most part, people, those of us in the room, our jobs aren't to do the work every day. Our jobs are to manage the exceptions. Because if we've done a good job defining the business model, it works by itself. But the more it works by itself, the more it resists change. So we've created these very powerful business as usual processes that want to work in the same way over and over again, that work to a great extent on autopilot and will resist change. What that means is, I like to say that we have perfected, in many businesses, we have perfected the ability to create round holes. And the new idea that comes in is a square peg. And one of 2 things is going to happen. Either those round holes are going to change, or the square pegs are going to change. But if you ask yourself, for 30 years we've been working on efficiency, right? We've been doubling down and investing in efficiency. Are we going to change all those models for one new idea? Or are we going to change the idea to fit all the models we worked on for 30 years? Which is more likely? Right? For 30 years we've been investing in efficiency. We're not going to change those efficient models for one new idea. The idea is going to change, not the processes. So what I like to say is, when confronted by innovation, most organizations, most processes, most business as usual models get concerned. Because innovation should be unusual to them. It is unusual. It's risky, it's dangerous, it's new, it requires a different way of thinking. And given the fact we've been investing in those models for 30 or 40 years, that's a big shock to the system. So innovation is often very unusual and creates a lot of discomfort in many organizations. And what I like to say, if you're ever in a presentation and you feel the need to associate yourself with someone who looks smart, therefore you can look smart, always use Einstein in your presentation. Because when you agree with Einstein, you're agreeing with one of the brightest people ever lived, and that by association makes you look interesting. Right? Thank you. Thank you. But here's something he said that I think every one of you guys, if you're here to do innovation, I like to say that most innovators in large corporations are certifiably insane. And the reason is, they and their businesses are trying to do the same things over and over, but they want different results. And that's Einstein's definition of insanity. Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and looking for different outcomes. When you innovate, or when you attempt to innovate in a business as usual model that's used to doing the same things over and over again, don't be surprised if the outcomes are always the same, right? Otherwise, you are insane. So how do you address that? We either have to change the processes and change the business model, change business as usual, or we have to change the ideas. And our argument here is we need to stop changing the ideas. We need to embrace those crazy ideas. And to do that, then we're going to need to change the way we work, the way we think about innovation, and the way we think about our business processes. Which brings us to an interesting point. Who's the biggest barrier in an organization to innovation? Well, there are three choices. There's senior executives, there's the vast swath of middle management, and they're the staff and the people who get things done every day. And the argument we'd make, if you read all the press, is that the executives are constantly telling us they want more innovation. Executives are always talking about how they want more innovation. Most of the people I work with at the staff level, the junior people in the organization, the people who go to work and do stuff every day, they're innovating all the time because they're trying to work around the business model every way they can. They're constantly innovating, they're just not innovating the way people want them to. So who sustains business as usual? Who's responsible for making the trains run on time in your organization? Who's responsible for getting the most done with the least resource? Well, it's people like Steve Carroll at the office. It's the middle managers. Middle managers are the people who sustain and build the business as usual models we've been talking about. They are the people who are responsible for getting the most done with the least resources. They're the ones who try to keep the trains running on time. They're the ones who are responsible for keeping out all the distractions and keeping you focused. They are the efficiency experts in the business. They are the ones who sustain and build business as usual models. They're also the ones who, unfortunately, are put in the position of either having to be efficient or be innovative, because you can't be both at the same time in the same organization. And most compensation, most advancement is based on being efficient, not innovative. So the interesting thing is that we place these middle managers in a really difficult location. I like to say they're stuck in the middle. Yet another musical reference. And if you know the song, jokers to the left of me, clowns on the right, here I am stuck in the middle again. And that's the idea of a middle manager. I've got people who tell me they want innovation but don't fund it or won't allow enough change. I've got people who are innovating but don't have enough power to actually make change. And I'm the one who has to get this project, this product out the door with the least amount of cost and the least amount of resources in the least amount of time. So if you're along with me so far, if you've bought into what I've said, I've argued that there are two issues. One, that we've built these very, very efficient business models that we call business as usual. And in those very efficient business models called business as usual, those business models reject innovation because they're risky, uncertain, unusual, costly. And that those business models are supported by middle management. So as I said before, we need to consider how to overcome that issue. And in the book I referenced earlier called Relentless Innovation, the work that we did, the research we did, identified the firms that were able to innovate successfully over time had something that we called an innovation business as usual. What they had managed to do is to build innovation into those models that we just talked about. They were able to balance both being efficient and being innovative simultaneously. So I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to create this concept of an innovation business as usual, so that innovation isn't quite so risky, isn't quite so sporadic. First thing I want to talk about is communication and commitment. When we talk to our partners, our customers, we have one saying about innovation, and that is, it's a southern saying in the US, but at breakfast, the hen's involved and the pig's committed. This is time for a polite chuckle. Good, thank you. But I think you get the point. The point I'd like to make is lots of people want to be involved in innovation. Not a whole lot of people want to be committed to innovation. Not a lot of people want to take that further risk. And this isn't just a question about commitment. This is also a question of communication. How committed is your organization to being more innovative? Is it sort of hen committed? Yeah, we want to be involved, but when the chips are down, we're going to revert to the way we've always done things? Or are we really going to invest in innovation in a way that's a true commitment? And are we going to communicate that to the rest of the organization in such a way that people understand what to do, where to spend their time, where to place their focus? Second idea. I run a lot of innovation programs for our clients. And probably for me, one of the most heartbreaking things is for one of my clients to come to me from an innovation team and say, I have a really important deliverable or project due in my regular job. And by the way, I get compensated and rewarded on my regular job, but I really like the innovation work we're doing. But I have to choose. And I know that if I don't go do my regular job, my compensation is at risk. My advancement is at risk. My evaluations are at risk. So when you're thinking about this idea of creating an innovation business as usual, you need to reward and recognize the people who are innovating, not only with plaques or with lunches, but also with the sense of that's the right thing to do, and here's how you'll be rewarded for it in terms of how you'll be evaluated, how you'll be compensated, and how you'll be promoted. Too many times we ask people who want to be innovative to do so, but we don't reward them, and then we penalize them or punish them for the time they spend away from their regular job. There's a very important aspect of compensation, reward, and recognition here that's ultimately very important to the success of an innovation business as usual process. Culture. So we've talked about commitment and communication. We've talked about compensation, and now we're going to talk about culture. And ultimately, culture is just what your organization believes about itself and what it reinforces about itself. Culture is probably the biggest barrier to innovation of any of the barriers in your organization. Because until and unless the culture believes that innovation is important, you can have great ideas, but no one's going to get on board. So the big challenge with culture is, what do we think about it when someone presents a new idea? Do we encourage it and take it further? Or do we shoot it down and tell them why it won't work? Do we embrace change and risk and uncertainty, or do we reject it? A lot of the aspects of culture are intangible. You don't have the ability to check them off on a checklist. They're very powerful forces, but they're not always evident. You can't always lay your hand on corporate culture. That's what makes it so hard to change. That's what makes it so powerful as well. So the idea behind culture is, I don't care what you say you want to do. The joke here is that this says culture eats strategy for breakfast. The point behind that is, it doesn't matter what you say you want until your culture believes in it, until the corporate culture embraces it, it does not matter. So if you want to create an innovation, business as usual culture, it has to buy in fully to the idea of innovation as a game changer in your business. So I've given you a couple of things to think about, and what I want to do as I begin to wrap this up is leave you with sort of 4 concepts that if you think, hey, this makes a lot of sense to me, how could I go back to my job tomorrow, to my company tomorrow, and begin to think about some of these things and do them more effectively? So there are 4 things I'd like to talk about very briefly that will help you take some of these ideas back into your organization. The first one is innovation goals. As an organization, what are your goals? You may say, we want to grow, we want more profit, we want to be different, we want to enter a new market. But one of the most compelling things you can do, from my perspective, is to set specific goals for what innovation is supposed to do. We want to enter 3 new markets with a new product, We want 40% of our revenue to come from products that are less than 3 years old. Because when you set those objectives, you set signals for your organization. The gentleman on the right there is Arthur Lafley at P&G. About 10 years ago, he came out to Wall Street and said, in 3 years, 50% of the products that we create will come from ideas that came from outside the organization. You guys may have heard this story. What's interesting about this story is, for 100 years, Procter & Gamble has never licensed technology. That was not in their interest. They had one of the largest research and development teams in the world in their industry. By stepping out and saying that half of all the products and services that they were going to release would come from the outside, wasn't a small change, it was a huge change. And he not only said that they were going to make that change, he said how big a change it was going to be, half their products, and he also said at what time that was going to happen. So he had this idea of setting a goal that they could not resist. He set very clear innovation goals that were measurable, that the whole organization could understand and get behind. Second, one of the things that really frustrates me from an innovation perspective is we say that innovation is important, but we don't train people on the tools and techniques and methods. So a lot of times when we're working with our clients, we'll enter and people will say, innovation is very important. We need new products. Let's get started. You ask the question, how many of you here have done innovation before or are familiar with some of the tools and techniques that underlie innovation? Don't know it. How soon can we get started on the project? And I ask the question, of all the things that are important in your business, how many of them do you do occasionally or without training or on a completely ad hoc basis? None. We define it, we get people trained on it, we hire people with the skills. Innovation, if it's important, you need to build the skills and capabilities. You need to train people to add those skills to the set of skills that you have in your organization. And there are skills, and innovation can be learned. The corollary to that is, there's nothing in your business that you do well that isn't defined. You don't make up how you'll process purchase orders on the fly. You don't sign legal documents without consulting a lawyer. In the same way, you can't do innovation well if it's completely opaque, if it's completely new to you every time, if you're doing it new for the first time every time you do it, if there isn't a defined way to do it effectively. Whether it's our process or someone else's process or a process you create, define how you want to do innovation. Because doing it once, you don't need a process. But if you plan to do it regularly, the only way to gain skills and knowledge is to use the same methodologies again and again. Creating transparency, creating visibility helps you build skills and capabilities. The last one, and I talked about this a little bit from a compensation perspective. If you want innovation, find the people who are passionate about it and reward them. But further, understand that real innovators, people who are really interested in innovation, are really motivated. They're really rewarded through something called intrinsic rewards. Most of us think about, when we think about rewards, we think of extrinsic rewards. Extrinsic rewards are money. I get a certain amount of dollars for every idea I submit. Intrinsic rewards, on the other hand, are the things that motivate innovators, and those kinds of things generally are, I get to work on my idea. I get to develop my idea further. I get to be part of that product. What most organizations find is if they start paying people for ideas, they get a lot of ideas that aren't very practical because people are trying to get paid more for their ideas. What you'll find is that people who are truly interested in innovation aren't compensated and don't want to be compensated that way. They want to work on their ideas, and that's intrinsic motivation and reward system. So that's not always easy. Someone in finance may not be able to do product development, but just keeping them in the process, keeping them aware of what's happening, allowing them to be part of that project will make a lot of difference to them and keep them interested and motivated. So you need to find out what people want from a motivation and rewards perspective and align your programs to that. I want to wrap up by saying I tried to give you 4 things to think about in terms of those 4 C's. We talked about commitment and communication. We talked about compensation. We talked about culture. Those are the kinds of things to focus on. And I gave you 4 things to think about, and one of the most important is clear goals, then getting the skills and capabilities you need, defining the process, how will we work, and defining how to reward and recognize people who are actively engaged in innovation. I'm going to put one more slide up here. This is just different ways to contact me. If you're interested in getting in touch or have questions, I'd welcome any conversation. And as I finish, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, if there are any. Thank you. Were you asking about when a small company is acquired by a large company, how do you sustain innovation?
Exactly, but here as a small branch or whatsoever it turns out.
So I can't speak directly to your situation, but it is difficult because I've been part of a small company that was bought by a large company, and that changes your culture. And you must have had good reasons to want to be acquired. I don't know what they were, but one of the things I would always try to understand is what are the innovation opportunities. The biggest things that you want to try to achieve is that when you join a large corporation, they tend to move more slowly. They tend to have more risk or understand the risk factors more effectively. They tend to also have something that smaller companies don't have. They have a large install base of customers they want to protect, and they don't want to disrupt those customers. So it's very difficult. Large companies tend to try to defend their market share, where small companies are aggressive and try to grow market share. So it often can be very difficult for a small firm to go into a large company and sustain innovation. The best thing that we've seen is to form a holding company, if you can do that, where you can still operate somewhat autonomously, but still part of the larger holding company, so that you don't have to become part of the culture of the larger organization. Because when you do become, you're going to adopt their culture more than they're going to adopt yours. I know that's not a perfect answer, but that's the struggle that many small companies have.
Hello.
Hello.
One of the consequences of innovation is failure. And I mean, we have to align the, what's the name? The reward. We have to align the reward with the innovation. But what do we do with the failure? What do you recommend, or what are some tips and tricks for that?
So is your question more about the risk of failure, or how is failure perceived?
Well, yeah, in a way, if I want to give rewards to the people to be more innovative, at the same time as a company I have to accept that that comes with failure. So how do I manage the rewards there in a way that, you know, I don't punish them for failure, because that's going to stop the people to innovate.
Sure. So the question really has to do with if you're going to be more innovative, you can't predict the future perfectly. You're going to pursue ideas that will fail.
Exactly.
And if you're not failing, then you're not taking enough risk. So the bigger question is really a cultural question and a rewards question, because cultures indicate what's a failure and what's a success. So there's a couple of things you can do. One, fail faster in smaller ways. The first thing you want to do is demonstrate that it is okay to fail, but fail in very controlled ways. So is it possible to do what we call fail forward faster? Meaning, I'm failing, it's okay to fail, but I need to learn why I failed, I need to incorporate that in the next development, and I need to find ways to fail cheaply and inexpensively. So it's not about a long failure, it may be about a lot of short failures that lead you to better success. So part of this is about changing your thinking about what a failure is. Fail forward faster. So I fail, but I'm failing forward. In other words, I'm carrying the knowledge forward with me, and I'm doing it in a faster way, in a more controlled way. So I'm trying to do much more iterative learning experiences. The second thing that you talked about is really a cultural phenomenon, which is if as an organization we've been resistant to failure, or if that limited people's careers or their ability to progress, what can we do? What we try to do is actually reward the effort and reward the learning, and recognizing that a failure taught us something, as opposed to a failure being a terrible thing. We've actually had, and we have clients who have They celebrate failures in the same way they would celebrate successes, as long as we can demonstrate that there's something to take away from that. So it's a cultural change about how we look at failure. Instead of it being a terrible thing that was unexpected, it is a good thing but was expected. So you have to create an expectation of failure. You may actually want to go so far as to reward it if it can be shown that that failure added more to your knowledge, or it can be incorporated in a new product or service, or you gain knowledge that you wouldn't have had. So think of it as a rapid experimentation and learning process. And that's the way to define it effectively. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand with the Lean Startup, the movement from Silicon Valley about Lean Startupping with fail fast and iterate and learn and, well, all that.
Well, the other thing you need to do that we found helpful is to introduce, many people associate experimenting only with an R&D or a research and development team. We should be experimenting with everything. New business models, new financial models, new channels. Experimenting should be part of every business function. And when you bring experimentation in, you're going to have failure, but you're doing it for a purpose. And so a lot of times that's a way to introduce it in a way that's a little less threatening.
In terms of size, is the innovation department as big as the accounting, the finance, like in an organization like Kellogg's or Ford or General Motors? Or because it's a new, I would say that 20 years ago there was none. How do you know that is the right size? And
So,
what is happening in that compared to other departments? Is there a vice president, a director, or
So
how is the organization?
There's two schools of thought about innovation and its structure, or where it should reside in an organization. Our way of thinking is that if you're new to innovation, you should form a corporate team that is responsible for defining the process and the language and the function, and then work with the business units or the product groups to start innovation. But over time, as the organization matures as an innovator, innovation should get pushed out as close to the customer as possible. So what you're doing is starting out with a centralized top-down model, and as soon as you can, push that model out into the business. So the structure or size of the team is actually fairly small. You can have a team, and many of the teams that we've set up are no more than 4 or 5 people, even in a very large organization, because they're not actively doing all the innovation work. What they're doing is creating what we call a center of excellence. How do we innovate? What kind of tools should we use? What processes? Who are our best partners to help us do this work? And then that team then helps product lines, business units, geographic units, whatever, begin to do the innovation, because the innovation needs to be done close to the customer. We need to discover customer needs and innovate around that. So a corporate group often isn't all that successful because they're too far from the customer. But a corporate group can be valuable because then you know you have a consistent way of doing it across the organization. So small teams, initially corporate in the beginning, and then pushing that capability and expectation out into the businesses. It's rare to see a team of more than 5 to 7 people, even in a long-time innovative firm.
And I think going back to the question that she had, I think what she was trying to say is that what are the reasons for failure? Are there any common patterns that people go into that you can comment? The most common reasons?
Frankly, the biggest failure that most organizations have around innovation is they do what we call inside-out innovation. What I mean by that is instead of talking to customers or understanding the markets, they assert what they think customers need. So they think a customer must need this, so we'll create it. And what happens is they arrive at the market, and they either arrive late to the market, or they arrive with a product or service that the customers don't really want or need, or may have wanted 2 years ago or may need 2 years in the future. The biggest failure around innovation typically is that we assert what we think the customer needs. We innovate from the inside out rather than doing a lot of effort to understand needs and market trends, bringing those insights in, and then discovering how we can take new products and services to market. So if there is one big failure that happens fairly consistently, it's that.